phase to put this contained system, and part of that system can actually make enough test biologic for the whole population of South Africa. And when you've got two of those systems, we can make for the whole sub-region. So that's the one exciting continuous flow process yeast system that we are localizing currently. There is also work that we've done in E. coli. So we've done some work there that we believe it's a platform that is mature. What is not quite matured in our hands is the mammalian cell culture system that is still emerging in our hands. But we intend to have all four systems that make protein subunit vaccine candidates for people to have options for SARS-CoV-2, but looking into the future for any disease that might arise.
Thank you, Rachel. So Dr. Inani, so you have a unique situation because you're the only one who's not from South Africa talking about things that we don't really know about. Some of us know about quite a lot of the stuff going on in the country. But given the limited supply of COVID vaccines on the African continent, there are quite a few countries who are looking to get involved in the manufacturing, and Egypt being one of them. And most countries have tended to adopt a partner with a pharma approach or looking to develop their own vaccines. So can you tell us a little bit more about what Egypt are looking to do and what's the current status of vaccine production innovation in Egypt?
Okay. At the beginning, you should say that in Egypt there are several types of vaccines nowadays are available. So we have the Pfizer vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Oxford, and the Sinopharm, Sputnik. So many types of vaccines are available. But about the manufacturing at the beginning of COVID-19 vaccines era production, Egypt has received the shipments of vaccines, which is made by Sinopharm, AstraZeneca, Sputnik, Sinovac. And after that, Egypt starting to prepare or to construct a factory, Vaccinology factory complex. This is aiming to produce various types of vaccines, not only for COVID-19, but many types of vaccines like influenza vaccine, pneumococcal, polio vaccine, as well as COVID-19 vaccine. And this is for COVID-19 vaccine. This is done under the deal with a Chinese pharmaceutical company for the production of Sinovac. The factory in Cairo is supposed to produce more than 200 million doses per year to cover the Egyptian national needs for vaccination. In last July, Egypt started manufacturing the first batch of serum, around 1 million doses, at the Vaccinology company. This is for the biological products and vaccines, and it was populated or traded under the name of Vaccinology Sinovac, which is made in Egypt. The Egyptian health minister after that explained that the production capacity of this factory will be around 24,000 packages per hour, and this is a large number. She said that it is expected to be the largest vaccine production factory in the Middle East and Africa, and this will help the other African countries and the localizing vaccine industry in African continent. Also, the successful manufacturing of vaccine, which is done in Egypt. This was the second country after South Africa, of course. In April, South African company, I think Aspen Pharmacare, started the manufacturing, and Egypt followed South Africa after that in collaboration with Chinese company. For the Egyptian Sinovac vaccine, it shows around 91 efficacy, and this is applied in 7 different countries, including Brazil, Chile, Turkey, Indonesia, China, and Hong Kong. And this vaccine was safe, effective, and like any other vaccine, it was the range of effectiveness was around 86 to 98, and this is in accordance with all other vaccines which is spreading. That's all.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So I'm going to ask change the question, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. Inani, for your first reply, and then I'm going to open it up generally to the floor. because for the other panelists, I mean. And this is really in light of frankly, the world having gone kind of mad in the last week around Omicron, and the current status. But as a philosophical question, I know we're a mixture of academics and private sector. What do we think should be done to ensure vaccine supply for Africa in particular? And really, the question, it's got a bit of a short-term answer and a long-term answer. And I'm really interested in your opinions. And Dr. Nani, I'm going to ask you first, and then I'm going to ask any of the other panelists if they want to comment, because I think this is a question that has really changed a lot in importance in the last week, particularly. What do you think, Dr. Nani?
Yeah, as you said, maybe the situation is changed rapidly especially when we are talking about COVID-19. So every day we have new things about COVID. But at least we can say that the vaccine shipments to Africa have greatly increased. So about 50 million doses arrived in October, and this is almost double the number that has been arrived or landed in September. So building on lessons which is learned from the experience with those donations over the past several months, we can say that the international community, we should draw the attention of this international community to the situation of donation and shipments of COVID-19 to Africa. Many organizations like EVAT and COVAX focused on the accelerating access and rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, especially in Africa. And to date, around I think around 90 million donated doses have been delivered to Africa. However, the majority of the donations have been ad hoc, so provided with little notice and short shelf lives. So most of them it was not suitable and ineffective to achieve higher coverage rates across the continent, and for donation to be sustainable source of the supply that can complement supply from the EVAT and COVAX purchase agreements, and this trend must change. Also, we can call for some standards or adhere to some standards like the quantity and the predictability of the doses which is arrived. So the donor countries should endeavor to release donated doses in large volume and in predictable manner. Also for earmarking, the doses should be unearmarked for greatest effectiveness and support term planning, considering the shelf life of each vaccine, and make like a notice for the countries about the shelf life, and of course giving early notice if we would like to receive vaccine with a short life. So many standards should be adhered by both the donor country and the received countries in Africa, alongside with the other issue, which is the manufacturing of the vaccine in Africa itself. And this has already happened, as we said, in South Africa and in Egypt. And I think this will be for the long-term production or the long-term sustainability for acquisition of the COVID-19 vaccine in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to actually put Ibrahim on the spot now. Dr. Nani, you gave a very nice short-term and a long-term view. Long-term with a full finish view. Ibrahim, maybe with a BioVac or a PAVM hat, you might be interesting to see what you think as well.
Yeah, so, I think I agree fully with Shaima in terms of approach here. I think Richard, and to the audience as well. I think on the short term, from a short-term point of view, I think it's quite obvious, it's been exciting. We've seen a lot of letters of intent being signed on the African continent. I think BioNTech has gone into Rwanda. I think they've now gone into Senegal as well. There's talks going on in South Africa, but I think a lot of these partnerships need to be realized as quickly as possible for us to build capacity in Africa. So I think from a short-term point of view, I think the key thing is that we need to capitalize on this wave of generosity out there. So obviously it has to work in Africa's favor. I think that's very important. We have to have a sense of independence. But I think from a short-term perspective, I think the flavor of the day at the moment is COVID-19. And so we have to capitalize on all of the goodwill out there from the international community in order for us to advance our capacity and our capability locally. However, though, I think we've seen through the Omicron that, South Africa and Africa, we're pretty much on our own here, so when things happen, we have to have the independence to be able to stand on our own feet and to be able to develop our vaccines very, very quickly. So from a long-term point of view, while the mRNA platform is a very useful technology platform to get us out of the starting blocks, I think the key thing here to the panel is really diversification. We have to diversify our technology platform. So it's good today we hear about plant-based vaccines as well, but that's not the only capability that we need. Whole cell vaccines, which the Egyptians is very good at making as well. We're very well aware of it. Conjugate vaccines, bacterial vaccines, it's certainly not the end game here. And real true sustainability in vaccine manufacturing really means that you have to have the capacity and the capability to be able to supply your own EPI vaccines, because vaccine production is really driven through volumes, and the volumes from a capability point of view is really within the EPI vaccines. So I think the long-term view is truly where we have to build the overall capacity to be able to support not only mRNA and plant-based vaccine manufacturing, but also the diversification into the other platforms. So then linking that back up to the PAVM, which you rightfully point out, I think the AVMI, and I think this is one thing that I would just like to point out, in 2015, we had a program that was called the Vaccine Manufacturing and Procurement Plan in Africa. And two key points came out of that particular study in conclusion. And it was that, for Africa to set up vaccine manufacturing, it will require the right level of political support as well as technical support. And I think those were two of the key messages that came out. It also requested that if it's at all possible within the near and foreseeable future, and this is 6 years ago, that a coherent and well-funded regional vaccine policy needs to be put in place, and it needs to be endorsed by both the African Union as well as all the regions within Africa. So I think, for long-term sustainability, this is definitely something that I get excited about when I see what the PAVM is busy trying to achieve. And then just in closure, because I don't want to hog the call and take too much time here, but just in closure, as part of the technology and IP work stream, one of the initiatives that will be rolling out as part of the framework for action plan, hopefully early into 2022, is that they will be launching, this is the PAVM, a capability called the Technology and Intellectual Property Enabling Unit, which will allow both vaccine providers as well as potential vaccine recipients to come into a room and to discuss potential partnerships, because I think the recognition is there that if we want to get there fast, we do it through partnerships, not obviously underpinning that there isn't a need for development, but if we want to establish capacity quickly, we do it through partnerships. And so this will be a sort of brokering service that will enable people to come together and to talk around potential partnerships, both from a commercial point of view as well as from a development point of view. It will also have finance sector in there to be able to enable funding. And I think very importantly, it will also have a regulatory arm to it, which means that the regulators can come in together, they can talk about the quality aspects, because the vaccines will be utilized for Africa. So I think this is a very exciting component of the PAVM, and certainly something that I would encourage everybody to get involved in order to advance vaccine capacity on the continent. Richard, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ibrahim. So I'm going to put Pietro on the spot now related to this, but knowing that you've got local government members on probably listening to this presentation, in light of what's going on in South Africa, Ibrahim's talking about PAVM and he mentioned the buzzword IP. What is your short-term and long-term view and advice for African people working in vaccines in Africa?
Thank you, Richard. So let me just say, in full agreement with Dr. Inani and with Abraham, all of the above we need to do. I want to maybe pause a moment and go back to a vision. We all know that under the PAVM that Abraham has just now mentioned, there was a vision set for Africa. So this is a goal. By 2040, Africa will produce 60% of the vaccines we require by ourselves. So there will always be a 40% or a percentage which is about supplies from from high-income countries and other countries, and I think that would be sufficient. In setting that goal, the PAVM has identified 22 diseases of which vaccines are critical for burden of disease in Africa. And I agree absolutely with Abraham and the other speakers. We can't do this only with mRNA. We need multiple platforms suitable to produce safe, effective, and very important, affordable vaccines for Africa. I'm going to circle back a bit around your comment about IP. We have seen during COVID-19, I'm aware of two significant tech transfers that happened quite rapidly. The one was with Vaccinology and the other one was Sothema. Both of those tech transfer arrangements happened with Chinese companies, with Sinopharm. And both of those arrangements started with full finish, but is now backward integrating with full tech transfer to create the capacity and the capability for drug substance manufacturing. We cannot reach a goal of 60% self-supply of vaccines without going backward to the production of the drug substance. I think Abraham said it earlier. There is a requirement for us to rapidly ramp up to have access to tech transfer in various platforms. In the mRNA vaccine hub situation, it's an interesting one, and in fact, it's turned into a fantastic opportunity for science and innovation and technical capabilities in South Africa. The original model that we will receive tech transfer from either Moderna or BioNTech or another late-stage supplier of COVID-19 mRNA vaccine did not happen. So what happened? The teams jumped in, Wits University, Afrigen and teams, and we are in fact now developing our own technology. We are in the process of producing COVID-19 vaccine 1273, which is based on the Moderna sequence. And the Wits labs and the African scientists in the last week made the drug substance. We will now bring that back to Afrigen for formulation because that's quite a challenge. So we are pulling together existing capabilities, Wits group working with RNA for therapeutic purposes, Afrigen and formulation, other partners to develop our own technology. That is fundamentally part of the empowerment for future capacity and capability. But the beautiful part also, and I think, Richard, that's going to be your question, who supports us? So now we get support technically from the inventors of the original mRNA vaccine technologies. We have full support from the South African government. And I want to say also in terms of the African Union, the African CDC that is driving the PAVM strategy, the support from both those entities in terms of technical advocacy and also IP advice is phenomenal. So what we need in Africa is an ecosystem. It's not only about production, it's not only about IP, it is about the total ecosystem that will ensure that what we produce will end up in the arms of people. And you know, we can talk a bit about the R&D program. The CSR a critical component, but there's a whole value chain from discovering to upstream and downstream R&D that will then fill a pipeline to also address the 22 other vaccine priorities that is required for Africa.
Thank you, Pietro. So it's only taken me 5 questions to go completely off script, people. So this is an important topic, and I think the last week has really emphasized the need for having these open and transparent discussions. Rachel, over to you, and then Ed, you haven't escaped this one because I'm going to be building on that. So Rachel, over to you first.
Thank you very much. I think a lot that has been said that is absolutely on the mark with respect to what Africa needs to do in order to have that sort of independence to make our own product. The one element that I want to emphasize is we need that absorptive capacity to be able to bring in those technologies and make something out of them. The absorptive capacity that I'm talking about goes beyond the brick and mortar and the facilities and the infrastructure that we're building. And it has a lot to do with strengthening our own R&D. And South Africa does have really some world-class universities that are generating really world-class intellectual property, research publications, outputs, and so on. there is something there in the middle, and Petra did touch on it, which is about training and skills and having a workforce that is skilled all the way from the R&D right through to being able to work in a setup that is accredited to make CGMP grade materials. And this is the space where I believe that Petro and Ibrahim are working in. We are working in the middle part where we really offering workforce training on the job, like hands-on skills training in bench type work, scaling up all the way to pilot and downstream processes. And we need a skilled workforce to complement the infrastructure that is being built. I just wanted to emphasize that element, Richard. Thank you.
So this is my question to you, Ed, building on what Rachel has just said was, okay, so we got the news about Pfizer, we got the news about J&J, we got the news about BioNTech, we got the news about Moderna. Where are these staff going to come from? And how are we going to train, exactly what Rachel's saying, the absorptive capacity and the scientists to be able to deliver on these? This is probably more in the long term. And I'm probably asking you in your capacity as a researcher, but also somebody, very senior at University of Cape Town, is how can the universities and the Department of Higher Education also feed into this about getting the skills base matched to the future needs?
So I'm going to start on script and then I'm going to go off script, and you will just have to see what you do with that. Bottom line is we actually have to start training people in vaccinology. Now, both the universities of Cape Town and Wits, and I think Pretoria, may actually have elements of this sort of thing in place. I think someone, probably Wits, does a master's, taught masters in vaccinology. I know at UCT, we run an international program that is not degree-based, but it trains people from all over Africa in vaccinology every year. So I was about to propose at the University of Cape Town to our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, who's got a very keen interest in vaccines, seeing as her group is working with Afrigen, that's the CIBA group of Sue Harrison, that we actually start a taught masters program in vaccinology, which would cover, they are admirably placed to do that because they've got 5 different kinds of fermentation going on. We have the plant-based manufacture. But I will point out that we've got patents on DNA vaccines. We have a hugely improved DNA vaccine vector. We've taken out patent applications recently on how to stabilize mRNA, which will be coming your way fairly soon, Petra, using a plant-made product. So there's a lot of innovation inherent in the system that could be taught, but all of the technologies, because of course CIBA is involved with BioVac in getting technology, and Afrigen in getting technology sorted out. So having a program of that nature that could well be international, because again, the PAVM story, Annelies Williamson is intimately involved in that. That was one of the suggestions made there, that we've got to have some kind of program that would be international in terms of Africa, that would teach people the technologies that are going to be used in Africa and provide a skills base that is drawn from biology students, chemical engineering students in the main, that would then be available to work in that spectrum. And here I go marginally off script because the panel that I thought I was on today was actually on plant-based manufacture. And the company that was spun out of our group, out of the Biofarming Research Unit, Cape Biofarms Limited, was essentially founded on people that came out of my lab, because those are the ones who are trained, apart from what the CSIR does, those are the people that are trained in the technology that is essential for what they want to do. So the kinds of, we have patents in Africa. People must not underestimate that. The problem was, and I'll give you a very short history lesson here, 2005, when we were all desperately scared of H5N1 influenza, we got emergency funding to work on emergency response vaccines for it from Poliomyelitis Research Foundation. By 2006, we had a patent on H5 production in plants. 2009, the influenza pandemic hits, and Aaron Matsoledi, Minister of Health at the time, says that we must have influenza vaccine manufacturing capacity. We still don't. that is a vital vaccine for Africa. Kills over 600,000 people a year, but disproportionately in under-resourced countries. We really do need to still be making that vaccine, and we still don't have capacity to do it, despite the fact that we've had both DNA and protein vaccines published and patented by the time that pandemic came around. So this is the second major pandemic to hit us in modern times that we were not prepared for. And we weren't prepared for it because infrastructure has not been put in place, because the government was busy doing other things. And this is where it has to be laid at the door of the government, because the kinds of IP that we produced got licensed offshore because other people wanted it. It's just that it could not be used in South Africa because there wasn't the capacity.
Thanks, Ed. Well, I'm impressed that it wasn't as far scripted as I was fearing you were going to go, but we still got time.
Wait.
I think there's a couple of key elements that are coming through. There's definitely a short-term and a long-term strategy. The long-term strategy isn't just about making your own vaccines. It's about having a workforce that can prosecute these programs. It's about looking and scouring the IP that you have and building the capacities, etc. There is the short term, which is bringing in and shipping in other people's vaccines and doing tech transfers. Ibrahim, BioVac are in a unique situation, having just done such a partnership with Pfizer-BioNTech to be able to manufacture and distribute their vaccine. Can you tell us a little bit more about the partnership and what are the kind of steps and processes that are required to ensure that when you sign a deal, that you can get up and running very quickly once the tech transfer has been initiated?
Thanks so much, Richard. So I think, a lot of the components has basically been touched on by the other panelists. I think you quite rightfully point out this is an exciting tech transfer and it builds on an existing relationship with Pfizer. So this wasn't the first one, following up Prevnar 13 technology transfer, which was a conjugate vaccine technology transfer. So the Pfizer-BioNTech tech transfer really, from a scope point of view, focuses on full finish only of the COVID-19 vaccine, which they call Comirnaty. And the reality is that we will utilize the existing vial filling line, which is in place at BioVac, to be able to fill and finish this particular product. Now, I think the exciting thing about the mRNA technology is that, first of all, from a capacity point of view, you don't need large facilities. And I think the other exciting thing, obviously, for BioVac in signing the deal with Pfizer was the fact that you could put 6 doses of vaccine in a single dose vial, in a normal 2-hour vial. And that's because of the volume that's associated with this particular mRNA vaccine. So this will enable BioVac to be able to fill 100 million doses annually of this particular vaccine, which is a significant achievement, first of all, because we've never had a product that we could fill to that level. But I think the more important thing is that, as we've been talking, this will now not be a product just for South African use, but it will be a product ultimately that will be for African utilization, because the idea is, of course, to distribute the vaccine not only in South Africa, but certainly into SADC, and then also hopefully beyond SADC into the rest of Africa. So it's a significant achievement. To enable this, quite a few modifications need to be done on site. But I think, as everybody's aware, the most significant modification that needs to take place is that to enable storage of the vaccine, you need this thing called cold chain. And we are in the process of putting together this freezer farm, which utilizes about 1,000 square meters of a very important real estate, but it's really just to put a lot of freezers inside of there. So I think it's exciting, but I think the more important thing is that obviously, Richard, to make these tech transfers seamless, I think a lot of it has been said. You need the absorptive capacity. I think Rachel pointed out the word. I think that's key to any technology transfer. So you need the skills. And the fortunate thing was that we were in a position with staff members on site doing vial filling work. We have a very strong quality management system that, of course, Pfizer knows very well because they've been working with us on this particular project and as well as on the Prevnar 13 project. So we've got the absorptive capacity. We've got a strong regulator in the form of SAPRA locally, who has come in, they've inspected BioVac, you know, and we have a commercial track record. So ultimately, I think these types of deals are signed on the basis of trust and confidence. And so fortunately, they were able to come around and sign the deal with BioVac. And then just out of interest, the expectation is fierce from the tech transferee or from the supplier point of view. You know, previous tech transfers, for example, into BioVac took 6 to 8 years to complete because tech transfers is quite complex. COVID-19 has put us under a lot of pressure. So it forces us to do things a lot faster. And so the reality is that by Q3 2022, BioVac needs to be in a position to commercially finish these products and to start distributing it. So we've got just under a year to tech transfer the process across, which, as Peter will tell you, is a very complex process when you're talking about mRNA, and then to actually put it into the market and utilize it, not only in South Africa, but beyond as well.
Thank you. So I'm just, we've been going almost an hour, and the discussion is very exciting. I'm going to just open the floor for those who might be watching from other areas to ask questions, either through the chat or to raise their hands. I'm not sure how this works, being the first time with the webcast support. But if anyone has a question, please type it in the chat box or raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, we'll wait for that to come through. It's the first time I've had a webcast support coordinating the meeting. So I'm going to go back to you, Rachel, and to find out in terms of the kind of the partnerships that the CSR would like to be looking for. You mentioned SMEs a little bit earlier on. What is the sweet spots, for lack of a better word to describe, to get a partnership, somebody looking to work with the CSR? Is it a master student? Is it a company? Is it somebody with just an idea? Because I don't want you to be flooded with a whole lot of requests that are not fit for purpose.
Thank you very much, Richard. And interestingly, over the years, we have seen individuals apply through our Jobs Fund initiative and get support to progress their ideas forward. Obviously, there is a very rigorous process of looking into, you know, the idea itself and the profile of the SMME that is wanting to partner with us and the potential feasibility with respect to the capabilities that we have for us to make meaningful contributions with them. And so it ranges from very small companies, and in fact, small companies have spun out of the CSIR. I want to talk about KBio, the outfit that are working on diagnostic testing kits that we co-invented together. So that was part of a cohort of enterprises that we supported, this one coming out of the CSIR. So we are open for SMMEs to work with us on our infrastructure, and this is typically supported through government. We are also open to partner with larger players that want to explore a lot of developmental work. And in fact, we're in discussions with some of our plant expression work to do all the background work, the upstream work from R&D, making prototypes, bringing them to phase 1, and then sending them over to partners that can do the large-scale commercial manufacturing. So our facility really is open for partnerships for a variety of profiles of players, from the individual with a great idea to SMMEs to now potential arrangements with companies that don't necessarily want to do the early development themselves. And some have actually availed us with sequences that they say, won't you please test out these, and then let's see if we can then put them into large-scale manufacturing. So it's a very broad spectrum of possibility if you talk about what it is that is possible on our infrastructure. If I can go off on tangent, Richard, if you would let me, one of the things that I think about is we are all talking about an infrastructure on the continent that can make a certain vaccine. And in fact, I had a conversation about it will be the largest one on the continent that will be able to make a particular product. One of the things that we always think about will be, can these infrastructures be multi-purpose so that at no point will they stand idle beyond making the products that they are making now? I just wanted to drop that there into the mix, and that's a little bit off script, but okay.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. So Ed, we're just trying to see how we open the question. So probably a question I should have known the answer to, but plant-based vaccine candidates or using plants, I suppose. Does it lend itself better to any particular type of vaccine or product? Now, I know you say it's versatile. You can make diagnostic reagents, you can make antigens, you can. But from in an ideal world, what is the best fit, do you believe, that we should be looking to do use plants for in the vaccine space? And I'm not just talking South Africa, I'm talking in Africa as well. What other groups in Africa are doing similar stuff to what Cape Biopharm, I must always get the names right, Cape Biopharm Labs are doing? It'd be very interesting for the audience to know.
Basically, it's Cape Biopharms and the CSIR who are making products in plants. CSIR concentrating mainly on antibodies and Cape Biopharms concentrating on proteins, but proteins to be used as diagnostics and reagents rather than as vaccines. But I give you the fact that CEPI in Australia, in Brisbane, this is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, they have a lab there for rapid response, that we were probably as quick as they were in getting a protein product out for SARS-CoV-2. The difference is that they had a pilot CGMP plant built into the unit that could actually then transfer technology straight out to a big facility. The big mistake they did is actually have the wrong backbone for their vaccine. The product that we made was pretty much identical to theirs. It was as immunogenic as theirs, and we've literally just published this 2 days ago. It's been accepted for publication. So in other words, we had something at the same time as a rapid pandemic response lab in Australia had. What we didn't have is a downstream. So because Cape Biopharms is not CGMP compliant and it's not big enough. So that sort of technology, in other words, rapid response and niche, because I've said it's infinitely scalable. So you can do it profitably at much smaller scale than people who've invested all their money in big stainless steel can do. And niche areas would be, and you would be familiar with the South African vaccine infrastructure platform that we proposed that then ended up being swept away with COVID. That proposed that surveillance and the products of surveillance get into program with One Health, that you start by making diagnostics, you could potentially make vaccines. And that was for things like viruses that cause encephalitis and things like Lassa fever. Nobody is yet making a vaccine for Lassa for West Africa. And that's an enormous population of people, but they happen to be in underdeveloped countries. So none of the big pharma have taken this on. This would be a really good place for a niche supplier. And of course, mRNA has jumped in. mRNA is not the be-all and end-all and the solution to all problems. A good protein vaccine will always be at least as good as an mRNA vaccine. They're just a little bit more variable to make and potentially a little bit slower. But the point is that once you've got that thing and you've got a decent adjuvant to go with it and you can cut the reactogenicity down, you can make vaccines profitably at a smaller scale, probably. BioVac is a relatively small scale manufacturer, for example. And when they were the State Vaccine Institute, they used to make something like 12 different human vaccines in South Africa. So there is room for niche manufacturers. Plants could fill that niche very, very effectively because of the savings in infrastructure necessary to actually establish them. And the fact that the functionality can be switched very quickly because the biomass is completely neutral. You can do what you like to it very quickly. And then all you have to do is switch around the downstream that does the CGMP part of it to basically accept a new product and then come out with the active ingredient at the end. that someone like Biovac or Aspen could actually fill and finish. So there's room for cooperativity in this regard. There's room for rapid switching of vaccines, and there's room for niche manufacture. So in other words, African problems. West Nile virus, Rift Valley fever, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, the various veterinary vaccines. We've not even mentioned veterinary vaccines. That's a major, major component for Africa that have to be manufactured cheap. So this is where that kind of technology would actually find a very good home.
Thank you, Ed. That was very interesting. Yeah. Please do, Petra.
Sorry to do that. I just want to respond and also build on what Ed is saying. Afrigen, the focus is very much is the mRNA hub, but maybe to share with everybody here, when the facility was designed prior to the mRNA hub expression of interest, we designed a facility that's multi-purpose, multi-product, and can support clinical trial material under a GMP conditions. We're on track now to have by June SAPRA Section 22C certificate license for a facility that's a pilot facility suitable for clinical trial material. And the way it was designed is yes, end-to-end production from drug substance, but any component of the downstream purification, full finish, formulation, full finish, you can plug in at any point within this facility. And the reason why it was designed this way is exactly for sustainability reasons. What happens beyond the COVID-19 vaccine? What happens if we have a pipeline of vaccines that we need to put through regulatory approvals? This facility was designed to exactly do that. And again, Richard, you said earlier, the legacy of COVID. One of the things that we have seen in the last 18 months is the massive resources now being put towards Africa, and particularly South Africa, to build these kind of capabilities. And I think we should really optimize and make the best of that and collaborate as best as possible.
Thank you, Petra. Dr. Inani, I was going to ask a question about regional, so Northern Africa, I suppose, and this idea about collaborating. Do you see that Egypt looking to do it all themselves, or do you see a vision where there's more of a regional approach, like a Northern and a Western and an Eastern and Southern Africa hub, kind of what PAVM are looking to do? But in your experience, do you think that's practical? Do you think it'll work? Is there a lot going on already in that space? I don't think we know much about what's going on in Northern Africa. And it'll be very interesting to see at a government and an institutional level what is currently happening.
So actually for Egypt now, as I said at the beginning, they constructed the first factory with a collaboration with a Chinese pharmaceutical company. But for making more collaboration, I think they are planning, as the ministry announced for that, they are planning for a second factory, which will be coming soon. And this will be in collaboration with another different country, different companies like US companies. So I think they are planning for collaboration with Chinese, US companies. But what is announced until now, there is any other news about any other collaboration with African countries.
Thank you. So I'm gonna build on that a little bit, in the sense that using a little bit of what I know about what's kind of going on in South Africa, and to see how we can try and build on it, and throw this question, probably the last question that we have, to the panel. So making a vaccine isn't just about setting up a factory. It's about a pipeline of candidates. It's about sustainability. It's about having innovation in antigen formulation, having skilled scientists. It's an ecosystem. And some of the thing that I can tell the DSI are looking to do is to try and link some of these dots together, either by trying to join the dots together. So it's no secret that South Africa is leading a lot of the world research in COVID. Some of it has backfired a little bit quite recently, but the elements around genomic surveillance, the antibody challenge studies, the growing out of the Omicron virus, these are world leading, and filling the gaps between that and how to make your own vaccine. none of these entities are housed within one institution. It's a network of researchers working for a common goal, and with a common goal of making this whole vaccine industry in Africa a reality. So I'm going to ask our panelists, kind of their last question is, if they were to do this all over again, let's hope we never have to do it all over again. What are the key learnings that we need to take forward? And really, this is for the audience to hear at a kind of a governmental or researchers in the mix. What are the kinds of things that we've done well that we need to focus on in the next 5 to 10 years to make this vision of making 60% of our vaccines by 2040 in Africa? And I'm going to, Ed, your hand is up. I'm glad. And then I'm going to ask everyone in turn as the final question.
This goes back to setting up courses that teach vaccinology. But courses need to be funded, and so do the students. And this is where the African Research Universities Alliance comes in, because there's going to be a hub at the University of Cape Town, which is why I mentioned the vaccinology course. But then, of course, there are Central, West, and East African hubs as well. So that alliance could end up training people for Africa in this area, in this very area, right from the start, from teaching people molecular biology and protein synthesis and how to make DNA and RNA, through to the chemical engineering aspects, to process control, that sort of thing. And it needs funding. So somebody has to be able to fund this in a serious and sustained way for the students and for the course expenses. I mean, this stuff does not come cheap. Right now, these sorts of things are done on little bits of money from all over the place. And if you're really lucky, we have a SHIP program, for example, from the MRC to look at HIV vaccines. But that's the last big funding we have, apart from working on veterinary vaccines. So if people want people to work on human vaccines, quite simply, they've got to fund it, because the networks are probably already there or they're being set up as we speak. So funding is an absolutely essential aspect, and it's got to come from governments all over Africa.
Thanks, Ed. Rachel?
I think that a lot has happened in terms of the scramble for us to establish capabilities. And there is now pockets of excellent capabilities that are coming up. For me, the thing that we can do now is consolidation and collaboration of the capabilities that we've established. I think traditionally, before we were feeling the heat of a real pandemic, we had this perspective of our individual niches, where I would say I make antibodies in plants and I do that better than anybody, and that's my niche. I think what is being called for now is a coordination of those niche capabilities into something that is more systemic, in something that is more deliberate in how we might deal with challenges that might come. From the R&D and vaccinology training that Ed is talking about, through to the capabilities in commercial manufacture that is being put in place by Petro and Ibrahim and Shaimar, and what is in between. And there is a lot that is in between with respect to translational research. It's not all just about being able to scale it up from microgram to milligram to gram quantity under CGMP conditions. I think there is all those aspects of regulation that need to walk the path with any product development. There is elements of techno-economics. If we make something, how effectively and cost effectively are we making it? And then looking beyond what is possible, because if we make these strategic capabilities in South Africa, maybe we can deal with the Southern African region. What does it mean for release of the product into the market within the region? So those regional perspectives of harmonization on regulation and. So I think we have a very unique opportunity to say we've learned a lesson, we've built capabilities. Now we need to be very deliberate about how we coordinate, strengthen, and fund these things so that we have a system that is capable, not individual pockets of capabilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. This theme of building the system is coming through again. So Dr. Inani, and then Ibrahim, and then Pietro on the same topic.
At the beginning, I just would like to emphasize that Africa suffered many other problems, not only at the health issues, but there are many other problems at the economics and political levels also. So the issue of funding is very important, and funding will support African researchers to develop their own research, their own vaccine, their own factories. They will help in both levels, not only in the health level, but in all other levels like economic and political. And this will help Africa to survive and to go over the many burden of diseases and many issues which is loaded with it.
Thank you very much. I see there's some great themes coming through here, and I think that we have about 50 people watching the session, so I'm pretty sure this has been taken to heart. Ibrahim?
Thanks, Richard. So I think I'm just going to build on what quite a few of the members have said, and I'll try and summarize it as quickly as possible. I think, wearing the AVMI hat now, that, a few years ago, AVMI used to say that vaccine sustainability, is critical, and that it will be built off the cuff of strong vaccine manufacturing capability. I think we've changed our tune now, and our tune now sings a little bit differently in terms of our stand on that. I think our stance right now as AVMI is that, to be able to respond to an emergency situation and for true long-term sustainability, you need strong vaccine R&D. And I think, this is critical. I think it is picked up on this as well, because I hope one of the lessons that's been learned is that, it wasn't the Pfizers out there, the multinationals, that came up with new technologies. It wasn't the AstraZenecas that came up with new technologies. It was the BioNTechs that came up with the new technologies. It was the Oxfords and the Jenner Institutes that came up with the new technologies. So you need strong R&D capability to be able to build a platform on that works as part of the ecosystem and that enables the manufacturing to take place. So I think that's going to be a critical thing. And obviously it's all dependent on funding. So the funding theme will always be a thing that comes through. The absorptive capacity is major in South Africa, but major everywhere else in Africa as well. You can have all the vaccine manufacturing plants available, but if you don't have people that will be able to man it, it's a huge problem. BioVac went on a recruitment drive, and Pietro is busy doing the same thing now for the MRNA Hub. We did it for the GBS project. We needed 35 staff members to take part of the GBS project, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It took us 2 years to find the relevant experience, internally in South Africa, because it was all about growing our own timber, to be able to spearhead a project like that. So the absorptive capacity is massive. Skill development and working very closely with universities is a massive part of building the ecosystem. And then seeing that everybody's gone off script, I'm just going to do it as well. The market, I think, is critical, and it was a huge component of the PAVM study. You have to find ways to incentivize vaccine production. And so let's argue for a second and dream that we have all the money in the world and that we can establish strong vaccine capability. The reality is that you need a market. Egypt can make vaccines for Egypt, but beyond that, it's not necessarily, they don't have the volumes to be able to be sustainable. South Africa can make vaccines for South Africa, but we really need more than that to be able to enable true sustainability when it comes to vaccine manufacturing. So you need a market. We need a pool procurement system in Africa that will be able to give us access to volumes, and those volumes will lead to proper sustainable human vaccine manufacturing. So Richard, with that, I'm going to thank you and thank the panelists and say thank you for being able to participate.
Sure, Ibrahim, thank you. And don't go just yet. We're nearly done. Pietro, you have the last word before me. So the floor is yours.
Making it very difficult for me because I agree with everything that the panelists have said. But maybe just to make this comment, if we have the mindset that we're building an industry that will have massive multipliers for socio-economic development on this continent, we will structure our approach that way. We will build skills. We will harness our strength. We will translate R&D capabilities into final products. We will understand the markets. We will do the techno-economic studies, and we will build platforms that are sustainable, not only in terms of manufacturing or full finish, but genomic surveillance, in vitro screening, preclinical development, regulatory, clinical development, effective manufacturing, and markets. So our quest is to ensure that one of the legacies, the one positive legacy of COVID-19 is a continent that has the ability to produce its own vaccines, improve its own vaccines, and develop new vaccines for the sake of socio-economic development. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pietro. And I think I just want to say thank you very much to this panel. This has been probably one of the most enjoyable panels I've been involved with. It's really been an eye-opener to see how many commonality things that we have in common. But I think it highlighted some things that a lot of people don't think about and should be thinking more about. From the building the system, I think I've been involved in a number of meetings in the last couple of weeks where everyone wants to build a system, and then the question, normally the last question that gets asked is, who's going to man these systems? So we need a massive training program. We need a sustained funding for the training program, and this is African-wide. This isn't just South Africa. To be able to build the skills to develop the technologies locally. We need an industry that can hire these people and absorb them into the industry, and then make products that the region, and I'm going to say the region deliberately, not just the continent, the region will absorb. And therefore, there's the whole market shaping, pool procurement kind of element that comes into it. We don't want to get to a situation where we have these massive programs and we have to make vaccines that are too expensive or nobody wants. So I want to thank our panelists for joining the session, taking up an hour and a half of their time. It's been very, very interesting. And it's a pity we weren't able to get questions from the people watching, but I'm sure this has been recorded and will be played, and there'll be lots of follow-up questions from that. So I'd like to thank everyone for giving up their time, and thank you so much, and have a great week, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you for being a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Great moderation. Thank
Nice
you.
to see you.
Challenges, stumbling blocks or starting blocks. Every day we face challenges, and every day we have a choice to turn back or to power through. At the Department of Science and Innovation, we power through economic crises, pandemics, global warming. We search, we collaborate, we imagine. Because we believe in the power of science, technology, and innovation to create a better world. Since 1994, we've asked, what can we do to make our country and the world a better place? And we've worked to find those answers. Because the challenges of the past weren't obstacles but opportunity. Partnerships, skill, and funding created the solutions we see today. The Department of Science and Innovation, making sure it's possible. Challenges. Stumbling blocks or starting blocks. Every day we face challenges, and every day we have a choice. To turn back or to power through. At the Department of Science and Innovation, we power through. Through economic crises, pandemics, global warming. We search, we collaborate, we imagine. Because we believe in the power of science, technology, and innovation to create a better world. Since 1994, we've asked, what can we do to make our country and the world a better place? And we've worked to find those answers. Because the challenges of the past weren't obstacles but opportunity. Partnerships, skill, and funding created the solutions we see today. The Department of Science and Innovation, making sure it's possible.